So where's Kamala Harris? We've had a really rough 3 days in terms of economic news, starting on Friday, going through today. We've seen some troubles in the stock market, some weak jobs report. Generally, over the last week, all of the economic news that's come out has been from poor to bad, not incredibly inspiring. And we haven't really heard much from Vice President Harris about what she thinks about the situation or what her vision for the future is. My best guess is that their strategy right now is to sort of hide her until the convention, which is in 2 weeks. She's not going to be doing any substantive interviews, a lot of rallies. And then through the convention, that will allow them to have a very controlled message and presentation about who she is and what she stands for. And then from there, have a much more settled vision in voters' minds. I think it's a mistake. I recognize the strategy, which is that when things are going well, you're riding a wave of positive campaign news, seem to be good vibes, good energy. You don't interrupt it by possibly doing something off script that ruins it. But at the same time, throughout this weekend, the thought that kept coming to my mind was in 2008, when we had the financial crisis. And that was a moment where then Senator Obama, I think, demonstrated real leadership and showed the country that he was a serious thinker and a person who was ready to be president. And for people who don't remember, in 2008, there was a huge economic catastrophe brought on by a housing bubble that burst, and major financial firms like AIG were on the verge of collapse. And in Washington, D.C., sort of a collection of House, Senate, and White House leaders came together to talk about it and to try to formulate a solution. At the time, John McCain, who Obama was running against, proposed that they both suspend their campaigns so that they could focus on solving this pressing issue. Obama rightly said that a president has to be able to multitask, do several things at once. And if he couldn't run a campaign and address an economic crisis, then that was a demonstration that he wasn't ready to be president. And in fact, when the congressional leaders got together with people from the White House, Obama really impressed the people in the room with his mastery of the subject, his clarity about what he thought the solutions were, and generally the sense of leadership and calm that he provided in a really rough moment. And in the moment of crisis, Obama gained credibility and a sense of gravitas, which was hugely important because at the time, you'll remember, the big attack on him was that Obama was just a lightweight celebrity. And at that kind of crucial moment in the history of the country, really, he helped to put in place some measures that solidified the country's economy. And he came out looking much more mature and thoughtful than McCain, who seemed a little bit erratic in his response to it. The problem, in fairness to Harris, is that she faces a challenge that's much more difficult. Obama was, in formulating a path forward, was distinguishing himself from the Bush administration, that is the president of the other party. Harris is more complicated because she has to explain both why things are going maybe poorly right now, and also how she would do things differently while maintaining these dual identities of someone who had a substantive role in the Biden administration and someone who disagreed with it and would take things maybe in a different direction. That's a really tricky thing to pull off. But it's also the case that she's running as her own person now. And every vice president who has undertaken this particular journey has had to figure that out. Even though he lost, I feel like Al Gore did that really well in 2000. But Harris needs to find a way to make clear what her vision for the country's economic future is, what her thoughts on the current crisis are, and what her solutions would be if she was in power right now. One of the challenges, I think, kind of the macro challenges of her campaign and her public perception is she has to demonstrate that she can shepherd the economy, but it's also the case that she doesn't really have a strong record of leadership. I'm not saying that she can't be a good leader or that she's not a good leader. There's just not much record of it. For the record, a lot of previous presidents haven't had a lot of kind of executive position leadership. Most famously, Abraham Lincoln was just a one-term congressman. Senator Obama had never really been in charge of anything up until when he ran his campaign. And so Harris needs to take charge of these moments where leadership is needed, a voice is needed. For a lot of reasons, Biden isn't really stepping into that space right now. And so when we've had 3 or 4 kind of rough days and the markets are really nervous and people are starting to feel uncertain about the economic future, we don't have a voice that is offering anything other than the criticism that you're getting from the Trump side right now. And part of that could be that Harris is kind of building this airplane in the air, and so she doesn't maybe have the bandwidth to build an enormous infrastructure in 90 days to win a campaign and at the same time respond to events. But it seems like the economy is sufficiently important enough that she has to begin to assert herself into this discussion. Right now, I think that maybe the thinking is that she's moving in the right direction in polls, but I don't think that that's really the right way to think about it. I think, and I'll talk about this more maybe in a video tomorrow or the next day, but I think the basic dynamic of the race right now is that she has basically reset things to the generic Democrat level, which is a slightly lower than 50% chance to win the election. And if she plays it well, she opens up certain states and she could have a real shot to win. The good news about having kind of this period of reset is that she can pitch herself as a, whatever the new image and the new brand that she wants to create for herself will be. The downside is it's a little bit alarming that a 60-year-old politician doesn't have a real clear sense of what she wants to do and be and say in a moment that is starting to resemble a moment of crisis within the economy. Before I wrap up, I just want to emphasize, though, that I do think it's really unfair and it's unfortunate in some ways that we don't have a voice that's providing some context for the economic situation, because we like to pretend that COVID didn't happen, but it did. I was there, right? I saw it. The economic landscape that Harris and President Biden inherited in 2021 was really dire. And where we are now has been a really masterful navigation of a national economy. If you look at it in terms of all of the metrics when you compare it to other countries, the United States is much better off. Inflation, even, which is the main thing that we're worried about in the United States, is much better in the United States than it is in any other country. We've seen economic growth, even when countries like China have really struggled. There's been robust job growth for most of the last 4 years, and wage growth has more than offset inflation. And all of this from a standing position that no other administration has ever had to face, which is an economy that had basically shut down, right? We shut it down ourselves in response to the disease. And so taking an unprecedented situation to where we are now has really been, from my perspective, at least an A in terms of overall economic performance. But we are hitting some choppy waters right now. It happens. Economies move in cycles. But we need someone to step forward and explain to the American public what their vision for the future is, because ultimately that's what elections are. They're about the future. And also to provide a sense of context to explain, yeah, the economy isn't where we want it to be yet, but do remember where we started from 4 years ago in a place of absolute collapse and calamity. And in most metrics, we're on the right path. And if we continue to move in the direction we are, all of the metrics that we care about can be a lot stronger. I think it's increasingly clear that the economy is going to be the issue that decides the election. It's a real shocker, right? But it's important to reinforce this because as much, fireworks as this election season has had, it still remains the case that the basic dynamics of an election, which is how well people feel like they're doing, is going to decide the election. And a really strange thing, and I'll end with this, is that a lot of polls tend to indicate that most people feel like they personally are doing better, but that the overall economy isn't, which means that there's probably a gap between perception and reality, and it's going to take some skilled communication in order to fill that gap. And in the next 90 days, that's going to be Vice President Harris's main challenge. All right. Have a great day. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Oh, yeah. Also, I'm new to this, so I always forget that I need to say this. like and subscribe, please. All the things that you always hear. This is my first time I get to say it. Look, I'm just starting this thing. Really appreciate the people who've been watching. So like it, subscribe it, share with your friends. And for reals, I'll see you tomorrow.